Hey everybody, it's Bukola. Today I'm pressing pause on our usual step-by-step journey through the SHIFT framework to share something more personal. We've spent the past few episodes exploring how to spot patterns, hear the lessons, and investigate the impact in our leadership and lives. But before we move forward, I want to share the story behind the SHIFT framework, how it was born out of my lived experience and why this work matters so much to me. If you've ever felt stuck, voiceless, or like you're just performing instead of truly living, I hope my story will remind you change is possible and your patterns don't have to be permanent. Welcome to Beyond the Pattern, Life and Leadership Unlocked. I'm your host, Bukola, keynote speaker, HR strategist, and leadership coach with over 20 years of experience supporting leaders through growth and transition. I'm also a first-generation Nigerian American. My name, Bukola, means added to the greatness in Yoruba, and this podcast is one way I live that out. We're living in a time of constant acceleration. AI, automation, and performance culture push us to go faster and do more. But speed isn't the same as wisdom, and going fast doesn't mean we're moving forward. That's why I created this space to reclaim the human side of leadership. If you want to stay connected, be sure to follow the show and hit subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you won't miss any episode when it drops every other week. Whether this is your first time listening or you've been following since day one, I'm so glad you're here. Let's get into it. Too often we see leaders as finished products. But every shift starts with a struggle, a setback, or a moment of doubt. My journey is proof that the SHIFT framework isn't just theory. It's a roadmap I had to build for myself, one hard-earned lesson at a time. Now, I think you all know I grew up in New Jersey, and for a time I had the stability of a two-parent household. After my parents separated, things changed. My mother remarried, and I lived with her and my stepfather for a while in the only home I'd known. When I was 12 years old, my mother passed away suddenly at 38 years old. It was following childbirth, and it turned out she had cancer, but it went undetected until the very end. This was back in the 80s before cancer was something people really talked about or screened for. After she died, my stepfather decided to move on with his own children, and my father had already moved on to Nigeria, so since he was no longer present in my life, suddenly I found myself without the support or presence of either parent. That loss left me essentially homeless and parentless at a young age of 12. It was a time of chaos and uncertainty, but even in that chaos, I wasn't completely alone. Over the next few years, 6 different families took me in, opening their homes and hearts. This is as I was entering high school. These weren't strangers. They were friends I grew up with, knew since kindergarten, neighbors, and especially Black American women who knew my story, knew my mother, knew my family and siblings, and chose to help. Their generosity and grace gave me a sense of belonging when I needed it most. Before all the chaos, sports were already a huge part of my life. Field hockey, track, soccer, marching band, student government. These were all places I first learned about mental strength, focus, and leadership. My coaches and principals saw something in me. They encouraged me to step up, to lead, to keep showing up. Lessons that would become the foundation for my own S in SHIFT, spotting the pattern of resilience and grit even in chaos. And let's be honest, if you can survive New Jersey coaches, you can survive just about anything because their brand of leadership is a unique brand that only works in New Jersey that I would not recommend in the corporate context at all. But it taught me a lot. It made me tough, and I had to unlearn quite a bit of it, but it served me well during that time. Now, even amid all the personal upheaval, I was fortunate to get early exposure to the world of business and leadership. In high school, I participated in a leadership pipeline program that placed young people in real corporate environments during the summer. I got to see firsthand how organizations worked, how teams operated, and what effective leadership looked like. We did presentations. We actually went to seminars on Saturdays to learn more about the business dynamics. We had presentations. It was pretty serious, but it taught me a lot. And that early exposure planted the seed for my future in coaching and HR. Later, after college, I joined a rotational program that let me experience different business functions across the country. One of those rotations landed me in a human resources role working with a leadership development team. And let me tell you, nothing says welcome to adulthood quite like being 21 years old and having to get your own 360 feedback assessment. So I had to get the assessment, then immediately turn around and get coached on all the ways I could improve. And this was after, me managing people with no experience. I barely had my first apartment, and suddenly I was sitting across from seasoned leaders, helping them interpret their 360 results and coaching them on how to use the feedback effectively. It was a crash course in humility and humor. I had explained to teams, many of them twice my age, how not to use the 360 as a tool of revenge and how to actually take action on the results. It was eye-opening, though, to realize that even leaders making well past six figures, that they were allowed to have issues. That was just mind-blowing to me. And the leadership team reinforced to me that everyone has areas to improve, which gave me more courage to take on my own issues, especially as I got to see all the different reactions to feedback, from denial to tears to I'll show them. What really struck me was how difficult it was for some people to embrace feedback because they were so committed to being right. Watching those struggles up close reinforced my own commitment to being a lifelong learner. I realized I never wanted to be so attached to my way of seeing things that I'd need a harsh awakening to grow. That lesson has stuck with me ever since. By this time, I had also started investing seriously in myself, not just through the rotational program, but by engaging in therapy, counseling, and other forms of self-development. This journey helped me appreciate the many different perspectives involved in every scenario. It became clear that leadership and growth aren't one size fits all. There are always multiple ways to understand and approach a challenge. So this awareness deepened my empathy and equipped me to support others more effectively. I learned so much from the leadership development practitioners. I worked with many of them, PhDs, and honestly, they were like superheroes in how they could handle anything thrown their way. That's when they pointed out something important that I hadn't realized. They said I had a real ability to handle discomfort, even as leaders were being emotional, and still keep them on task as we were, getting them to focus on their feedback from their 360. That experience gave me a front row seat to what meaningful work looks like, and it helped me get clear on the importance of being a lifelong learner. As my career progressed, I found myself moving through a variety of roles, each one teaching me something new about people and organizations. And to be clear, my transformation didn't begin at 50. In my 20s and 30s, I was already making bold moves, building a leadership track record, and evolving my voice. Those years taught me how to lead through growth, not just survival. And I started in learning and development, where I got a front row seat to how people learn and grow. Sometimes they resist change in a corporate context, and all that, helped shape my point of view. From there, I moved into recruiting and then into leadership roles where I was leading teams of recruiters. Eventually, I transitioned into executive search and senior recruiting roles and even higher level roles in HR and HR leadership, taking on responsibility for entire functions. All of these experiences gave me a broad view of people at every level, entry level to executive, across a wide range of industries. By the time I looked up, I had lived in 8 states and worked in at least 5 different industries. I learned so much from all the different leadership styles, team cultures, and business challenges I encountered along the way. It's one thing to read about workplace dynamics in a book. It's another thing to see them play out in real time in different cities, companies, and industries. Each new role and location challenged me to adapt, to listen, and to appreciate the unique strengths and struggles that people bring to their work. When I lost my family support, I was lost. My voice was gone. My world was upended. That's when I had to hear the lesson, the ancient shift. Asking for help was one of the hardest things I had to do. At the time, I didn't fully understand the weight of asking someone to take you in. Now at 53, I do, but for those who made space for me, even temporarily, I'm deeply grateful. Their kindness was a blessing. I remember I kept telling myself, this is temporary, Bukola. Just get through this. Keep moving. That mindset, adapting, adjusting, and learning from discomfort, carried me through college, where I earned full rides for both sports and academics. Even then, I made a bold move. I left the Northeast and started over in Georgia. It was a big adjustment, but one I'm glad I made. Now, I'd like to talk about trauma and your voice. As we talk about the I, investigate the impact, I think this is where both of those came together for me. One thing I'll start off by saying is that it's actually very common for people to lose their voice after trauma. Sometimes you can talk, but you don't always have the words or the will to say what you're feeling. I know that I was overwhelmed. I was angry. I was shut down, and I had no language for it. Things like anxiety and safe space and mental health, no words like that were shared or said during my childhood. I never knew any of that until way into like the 2000s, I would say. This is where investigate the impact became real for me. I saw how my silence, my survival mode affected my relationships, my choices, and my sense of self. Maya Angelou's story always stands out to me because she talks about how she stopped speaking after trauma, not because, I don't think it was because she couldn't, but because she didn't know what to say. She was processing and was so overwhelmed. I've seen the same in foster youth. I volunteered with kids who seem angry or withdrawn, but really they've just lost their voice. It's not an attitude problem, it's the result of pain and transition. And it happens in adulthood too, even in the workplace. I've seen it in 360 feedback sessions, leaders making 6 figures or more who've lost their spark, who are stuck in a pattern they don't even realize they're repeating. That's the thing. Trauma doesn't stop at the front door of a workplace. In HR, you get to see behind the scenes, and what you find there is often not what you'd expect. It's taught me to challenge assumptions, to dig deep for compassion, because you just don't know what someone's carrying. Lifelong learning, trauma awareness, and choice. I want to talk about that next as we deal with the F in the shift framework, which is find new ways to shift. Long before I ever picked up Oprah's book or dove into the science, my volunteer work with children who had lost parents gave me a front row seat to the impact of trauma. The medical professionals I met taught me how pain affects the brain and shapes how we become. That early exposure gave me a deep appreciation for our capacity to reinvent ourselves. This is where find new ways to shift began for me. Reinvention is always possible, but it requires intention and choice. You can decide tomorrow to do something different. And if you lean into that decision, real change can happen. Later, I came across research like What Happened to You? That's the book by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry. And it touches on the role of the brain and trauma. And it confirmed what I already knew, which is the brain is resilient, and with the right support and mindset, we can heal, grow, and transform. To this day, I'm a lifelong learner. I'm usually running, working out, or walking with an audiobook in my ear. And if you see me running and laughing out loud at a podcast, again, don't worry, I'm not losing it. I'm just learning. That's my thing. Now I want to go deeper into the F in the shift framework, which stands for find new ways to shift. I want to pause here and really touch on why this step really matters. Awareness and insight are powerful, but they're not enough on their own. Real change happens when you're willing to experiment, when you try something new, even if it's uncomfortable or imperfect. Now, what does find new ways to shift really mean? It means getting creative, brainstorming fresh approaches, even small ones, challenging assumptions, questioning the way it's always been done, taking action and testing out new behavior or seeing what happens. Now I want to talk about 3 practical ways to find new ways to shift. There are small experiments, there are big results. At the end of the day, you don't want to wait for a perfect solution. Trying a small change, whether it's a new meeting format, a different way of giving feedback, or a new morning routine, all that can make a difference. So look for ideas outside of your usual circles. Read a book from a different field. Ask a colleague in another department how they solve similar problems, or listen to a podcast from a different industry. Involve others in the process. Invite your team or friends or family to brainstorm with you. Sometimes the best new shifts come from unexpected places. And most leadership failures aren't because of a lack of strategy. They're because people are stuck in outdated patterns. We keep using yesterday's responses for today's realities. Now, why do some leaders avoid this step? I'll be honest, trying new things can feel risky. We worry about failing, looking foolish, or losing control, but the cost of staying stuck is almost always higher than the cost of trying something new. Now, from a coaching standpoint, I want to leave you with some areas to reflect on. These are some questions you can think about for your next week, or just in general. Just make a note and just something to come back to. What's one area of your life or leadership where you feel stuck? What's one small, safe experiment you could try this week? And who could you invite to help you brainstorm or hold yourself accountable? And here's a mini exercise if you're interested. We can do this together, at least, to apply or give it a try for next week. Write down one pattern you want to shift and list 3 new approaches you could try, no matter how small they are. And then commit to testing at least one this week and jot down what you learn. Let's see. A client of mine was struggling with team engagement. And instead of launching a big initiative, what she did was she started each meeting by asking, what's one thing that would make this week easier for you? And that was a game changer for her because it just got her team in a regular mode of just reflecting on ways to just improve how the team collaborates and communicates together. So that small shift opened up honest conversations and led to bigger changes over time. So something like that is an example of something you could consider for yourself or your team. Remember, you don't have to overhaul your whole life or leadership style overnight. Finding one new way to shift and trying it, learning from it, and keep on going, that's how transformation can happen. One experiment at a time. Empathy, perspective, and humanity, living in other people's homes, taught me something early on. No one has a fantasy life. It's easy to assume things about others, but you really can't judge a book by its cover. I used to hate when people said, you'll be better for this terrible experience. But now one of my superpowers is being comfortable with discomfort. I can sit with people through suffering, whether it's in the workplace, during conflict, or supporting a friend through loss. My own experience with grief gave me perspective. I used to think losing a parent later in life might be easier, but I've learned pain is pain, no matter when it comes. Back then, the Jersey response was, you'll be fine, suck it up. But I know now it's not that simple. As a child of Nigerian immigrants, I learned early how to navigate complexity and how to step up for my family. Sometimes children of immigrants can often carry heavy expectations, but they also can develop deep resilience and adaptability. I know growing up Nigerian American meant living in two worlds, like balancing high expectations and traditions of my parents' culture with the realities of growing up in New Jersey. There were times I felt like I didn't fully belong in either space, but that in-between experience taught me how to navigate complexity, code switch, and build bridges between different perspectives. Today, that cultural fluency is one of my greatest strengths as a coach and leader. Now, my immigrant background has shaped my approach to leadership. It taught me that diverse perspectives aren't just valuable, they're essential for innovation, empathy, and growth in any team or organization. Team feedback from performative to connected leadership. At the end of the day, there was a turning point in my leadership when team feedback made me realize I was still performing, doing what looked right, but not always connecting on a deeper level. And that brave feedback challenged me to move from just being effective to being truly present and connected as a leader. It wasn't easy, but it was the catalyst for my shift from survival mode to authentic, connected leadership. What sets me apart as a coach today is I don't just talk about frameworks, I've lived them. I know what it's like to lose your voice and find it again. I lead from experience, not just theory. My approach is rooted in compassion, cultural fluency, and a willingness to challenge assumptions, my own and yours. Sometimes people mistake my strength for hardness, or they assume that because I carry myself with confidence, I haven't been through much. The truth is, confidence and compassion were earned, not gifted. I bring the grit of Jersey, the adaptability of an immigrant, and the heart of someone who's walked through the fire and came out honest, healed, and still laughing. So I've worked across industries and regions. I've led teams, made mistakes, and learned from them. And I'm not afraid to share those lessons. My story is what it is, and I have no shame in it. So if you choose to judge me, it says more about you than it does about me. But I found that when I started being open, people finally understood where I was coming from. Now, I really appreciate you listening. Before I close, I want to take a moment to recognize the extraordinary women and organizations whose support, advocacy, and generosity changed the course of my life. These are the pillars of my story, the hands that steadied me, the voices that cheered me on, and the hearts that believed in my potential when I couldn't see it myself. To the Central Jersey chapter of Delta Sigma Theta, you didn't just offer me encouragement, you provided scholarships, community, and a network of sisterhood that made higher education and leadership possible for me. To Dr. Janetta B. Cole, as the former president of Spelman College, you saw my leadership potential and advocated for me at critical moments. Your vision and belief in Black women leaders opened doors and inspired me to lead with courage and compassion. Thank you for waiving my tuition. To Rosemary Allwood, former dean of students and passionate mental health advocate, you were a lifeline during my college years. Your hands-on support and guidance made sure I always knew I was seen and valued. Thank you for advocating on my behalf with Dr. Cole. To Lenora Jackson in financial aid, As the head of financial aid for Spelman College, you were a champion behind the scenes, helping me navigate the maze of financial aid and forms and making sure resources and opportunities were within reach. And I appreciate you for that. Tamara Mitchell, a proud Delta coach, teacher, and tireless advocate for all children, you provided mentorship, encouragement, and a living example of servant leadership. You always reminded me that my story mattered, and you gave me a home. I stayed with you the longest in high school, and I thank God for you. To Melody Merchant Smalls, a Wall Street recruiter with a generous spirit, you answered every one of my 50 million questions about recruiting and career growth. Your willingness to share your expertise and time gave me the confidence to pursue new professional paths. These women and this organization did more than offer words. They took action. They provided shelter and a sense of belonging when I needed it most. They gave scholarships and financial guidance that made college possible. They advocated for me with college leadership, offered hands-on coaching, and mentored me through every twist and turn. Their wisdom, generosity, and belief in my potential, especially during the hardest seasons, shaped who I am as a leader, coach, and a woman. So to all of you, Central Jersey Chapter Delta Sigma Theta, Dr. Janetta B. Cole, Rosemary Allwood, Lenora Jackson, Myra Mitchell, and Melody Merchant Smalls, thank you for being my village, my advocates, and my inspiration. Your legacy lives on in every life I touch. And all of these women are Black women that stood for me. And I praise God for them. They weren't Nigerian. They were Black women. They were Black American women. And I appreciate you all. As I look back, I think about that 12-year-old girl, scared, alone, and unsure of what the future would hold. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know what resilience or reinvention meant. But she found a way to shift, to ask for help, to try again, and to keep going. If a 12-year-old girl with nowhere to live could find the courage to ask 6 families for help, to keep showing up, and to shift her story, then you can shift too. No matter where you start or what you're facing, you have the power to choose a new pattern, to reach out, and to take the next step. Change is possible for all of us. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonates, reach out, share your own, and remember, you're not alone on this journey. All right. I think that's it. To my coaches, mentors, and everyone who made space for me, your support was a blessing. I've chosen to channel the gifts born from trauma into service so others feel seen, safe, and strong. There's power in getting your voice back, not just to survive, but to serve. So if you've ever felt stuck or voiceless, know this: you are not alone, and change is possible. Reflect on your patterns, share your story, reach out for coaching. Let's keep learning and growing together. And hey, if you ever see me running, laughing, and talking to myself, I promise I'm just working on my next episode. So thanks for listening. That's all I got. Enjoy your week, everyone. Take care. If this episode resonated, I'd love to hear from you. You can text or leave a voicemail at 404-828-0279. That's 404-828-0279. Or you can visit me at bukolaogantala.com to send in a question, share your story, or explore coaching and speaking services. Whether you're leading a team or learning to lead yourself, I'm honored to be on this journey with you. And if you haven't already, hit follow or subscribe so we can keep growing together.